So, hi there, Matt. Thank you so much for taking some time out to have a conversation with me today. Before we get into the sort of meatier questions, obviously, welcome. But could you share a little bit about who you are, your school, and your role within your school, please?
Of course, not a problem. So my name is Matt Round. I'm the Deputy Head Pastoral at St John's College in Southsea. It is a independent day and boarding school. We have obviously boarding residential students as well as day students. My role is to manage the boarding community as well as being DSL, and so looking after the safeguarding aspect. I also line manage the pastoral leaders within the day houses as well. So that looks after children from the upper sixth all the way down to year 5.
So, a little bit busy then, keeps you on your toes doing that.
Doesn't it just?
So you've come through. We were on a panel debate recently talking about safeguarding and the issues involved in there. On that panel, you were talking about how NetSupport DNA has helped you with your safeguarding efforts. So for this conversation, could you just share how NetSupport DNA does help you with your safeguarding efforts?
Yeah, of course, not a problem at all. And obviously, there's a big chunk in KCSIE 21 that looks at online safety. You know, there's an entire appendix for that. And I am pretty sure that it is part 2 in the management of safeguarding that's got a big section on online safety as well, but it's also interwoven throughout the entirety of the document. So every time you look at anything that is abuse or neglect, anytime that you look at anything that is peer-on-peer or prevent or FGM, there's always the suggestion within that particular document, but also within practice as well, that the reality of safeguarding and the lived experience of those children is that it is both in virtual contexts and in real world contexts. So obviously our real world context we can observe because we can talk to people and we can see them and we can talk to parents and we can do HR and pastoral investigations and safeguarding investigations. But in terms of the online world, that tends to be a bit murkier and a bit more tricky to see. So we use the NetSupport for a variety of the sub-programs, but the DNA in particular I find very useful from both the safeguarding and from the pastoral care point of view. So if I give you a really good example, and that is self-harm and eating disorders. So we've seen particularly over the pandemic, things like eating disorders, self-harm, mental health in children really has suffered tremendously, and some of those cases are on the rise, both as a result of the pandemic and the isolation and the school closures, but also in the sense of the way our society is at the moment. So what we do, the NetSupport DNA allows us to see what students are searching for and what they're looking for. And we get that that data is converted into information in really useful ways. So we get the word cloud. The word cloud is really good. So every time a child types in something, it is logged and registered, and then it's compared against a database of known terms, and that database is alterable both from NetSupport side, but also from our side as well. So we add terms that we're coming across, and you get to see the scope and the size using that word cloud function. We use that to allow our PSHE coordinator, Karen, who designs our PSHE program, to augment it as needed. So if, for example, we're seeing spikes in boys looking at gym supplements and protein shakes, then we can look at what they're learning at in PE to firstly make sure that that's not the focus of a project, but also we can then look at our academic PE provision and make sure that that's being balanced out with healthy choices. And then Karen can add some healthy choice work within the PSHE program as well. But we also get these regular reports. So as well as the word cloud being quite useful for those that kind of information, we get these regular reports sent through to us. We get them every couple of weeks. You, I believe, can set them up so that you get them at the frequency that works for you. So at St John's, we work in a vertical house system rather than a horizontal year group system. So every couple of weeks, our heads of house and me and the house parents, so the people that look after the residential students, get a report about the most common searched for phrases, and within that they can then start having more meaningful conversations about students. Now that's useful on a couple of levels. So firstly, it's useful because you get to know the kinds of things that children are looking for. So you get to see if there are any flags out there and there are any concerns that you need to investigate or put interventions into support. But it's also really good CPD, because it means that you, as a practitioner, you might not be using these terms. You might not have a clue what they mean. But if you see, something on there like Anna, for example, then you can have a conversation with students and, well, what is, why are people looking at Anna? What does this mean? And then that gives you a road in to have those conversations with students about wider general concerns, which means that you can then also pick up on conversational cues as well. So, oh yeah, no, so and so is looking at, and I know that, and so on. So not only do you get to develop your own practitioner understanding, but you also get that route into the real world safeguarding as well as the virtual world.
Brilliant. I mean, there are so many ways in which you're finding it useful, and it's lovely to hear. So it's so helpful within the school as well. Tell me, how do you use NetSupport DNA on a daily basis?
So it's used on a couple of levels. So obviously, pretty much everything that students and staff put into a computer or a device around college is logged. So it is a real time check on what people are searching for and what people are looking for. So although we get these regular reports and we get these word clouds that we can dip in and out of, it's quite useful to go in every so often and just have a look and see what people are searching for. Now that can be really useful in terms of the safeguarding, but it can also be really useful in terms of refining what goes on with DNA and how DNA impacts in your practice as well. So for example, if I have been having a conversation with the head of history and I know that they've been looking at the fall of Stalingrad, or they've been looking at the rise of the Socialist Democrats in Germany, then I know that I need to go on to NetSupport DNA and I need to just be a little bit wary of all of those fascist flags that are totally going to come up over the course of the next couple of weeks. So it allows me to have conversations. It facilitates those conversations between what staff are teaching in the classroom, what we're seeing as pastoral support workers, pastoral leaders and safeguarding leads, but also allows conversations between those two and our network manager as well. So it allows a full spectrum conversation, and that happens very frequently.
That's really interesting. I mean, it seems to me from what you're saying then that not only can you have the sort of like ongoing, regular kind of sort of timely things that happen just de rigueur, as it were, but you've also got the ability to be really responsive based upon how things might be sort of tweaked or changed in the curriculum. Let's say something happens in the media, and so children might be looking at that as in their news as part of their sort of tutor time activities. So you can be responsive to how it all works and ties in with what you're trying to do to safeguard the children.
No, very much so. And you're absolutely right. And what's quite interesting is, although within our PSHE and tutor time and so on, we obviously are looking at world events and current events, and staff and students will be searching for those terms. There may be news stories that we're not focusing on because as adults, they don't really necessarily hit us or speak to us in a particular way, but it's something that the students are particularly keen on looking at. So if there is, for example, a new Netflix program for an example that everybody's wildly keen on watching, but you've never heard of, and then suddenly you've got all of these news threads or subreddits appearing on your NetSupport DNA, then you can go, actually, this is something that I need to be aware of. So it's CPD focused, it's safeguarding focused, but it also is responsive and interactive with your curriculum and your program. So the next week you can say, well, last week we were looking at what's going on in the fall of Kabul in Afghanistan, but actually looking at what you're looking at, children. This is not something that you're particularly interested in. This is very important, and we're totally going to look at this. But also, let's have a look at this thing that's happening in the subculture that you're engaged in.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Matt. One of the things we spend a fair amount of time on is making sure that we've got a broad cross-section of language packs. Schools across the country, obviously, have got many learners, and particularly in the international sort of school and independent school setting, from children from lots of different cultures. Do you find the language packs that are inside DNA useful for you in the work that you do?
Yeah, very much so. And I think what's one of the things that I really like about it is not only because they're useful, the language packs themselves, because it allows those international elements to come in, but actually one of the good things about DNA is that you can add those words and send those phrases over to you guys as well. So if we're coming across stuff that happens within English language, it's pretty obvious, right? So we've come up with this new word, everyone's talking about it, we bash it into the system and it flags it up. But we're also getting information from people like the Internet Watch Foundation, and I know they share and supply you with words and phrases and things that are commonly found in their work as well. But you're not necessarily getting the language from our international students and our international borders in the same direction. So having those language packs and having the ability for things to feed into our international English as an additional language students is really powerful.
That's really, really useful. Thank you. I'm going to start trying to wrap the sort of conversation up, but you're clearly a big fan of what NetSupport DNA and what it can do and support. But are there any sort of favourite features you haven't mentioned yet at all, Matt, that you'd like to share with us today?
Not that I haven't mentioned, but my favourite feature is the word cloud. So we actually we don't call it NetSupport DNA in the Pastoral team. We do when we're talking to you guys, and we do when we're talking to external agencies. But my favourite feature within the package is definitely the word cloud. And the reason for that is it speaks to the way that my learning style feeds into as well. So it allows me very quickly to see most commonly searched for terms without being data heavy. So it really does transform that data into information. So in a very visual, very easily digestible, very easily accessible way.
No, absolutely. And to be fair, it's my favorite feature as well. It gives you that contextual oversight in a heartbeat, doesn't it? Yeah. And it's so visual, isn't it?
Sorry to jump in there, Matt. What I also like about it is it's not just words on a page, is that there are interactive features of it as well. So you come up with these words and everybody's searching for this thing. And it's like, well, I have no idea what that is. And you click on the word or hover over the word and you get a meaning and a definition, and then you can drill down into the data from that space as well. So it's not just a snapshot, it's an interactive snapshot that allows you to do deep dives into the issues that are emerging.
And that's really helpful when, like you said before, when a word comes up, you don't know what it is. It actually helps you learn as a professional what these things are. Because how difficult? I mean, I've got children myself, and some of the things they say to me, I'm like, I don't even know what this word means. What? You're sick, Dad? Okay, I feel all right myself. What it actually means is something completely different, isn't it? So, no, I completely understand how helpful it can be. Last question for you, Matt. How has having NetSupport DNA sort of helped you perform your safeguarding tasks in the school?
So, I mean, obviously, the compliance aspect is key for both state and independent schools. Making sure that you are compliant within the legislation is a really good foundation, and it's very important. And NetSupport, the DNA and all other aspects of the NetSupport package totally allow you with confidence to have that tick box compliance foundation start. But actually, safeguarding is much more than that. It's what you do above that compliance. And NetSupport DNA in particular allows us to do that because of that drilling down. It allows us to augment and be flexible within our programs such as PSHE. And obviously, KCSIE tells us that safeguarding must be taught to children. So having the ability to be reflexive in terms of the things that the children are looking for, the experiences of the children online, and then combining that with our knowledge and abilities as professionals is a really powerful tool in terms of taking that compliance to excellent practice.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. So welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining me for this conversation today. Could you share a little bit about who you are and the school you work in and the role that you have within that school, please?
Yeah, so I'm the network manager at St John's College. So I tend to look after a lot of the IT, make sure everything's up together, looking at all the new projects, making sure the network's running fine, everyone can log in. And then me and the team are sorting out the general login issues and day-to-day small issues that we get.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt. Speaking of the issues that you face, what are the main IT challenges that you face?
So some of the main IT challenges that we face, obviously our firewall does a lot of the filtering for URLs and websites. But again, that doesn't do any monitoring of the desktop side of things. So we can't expect a teacher to be sat behind every machine while they're working away, making sure they're on the right sites and they're doing everything that they should. So that's where the NetSupport software comes in and helps us with that sort of thing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that, Matt. Why did you choose NetSupport DNA, picking into one of the software products that you have at the school? Why did you choose NetSupport DNA? And how does NetSupport DNA compare to some other solutions you might have used in the past?
So previously we had RM as our network here. That had some software built in originally, which was okay, but it wasn't particularly reliable. But NetSupport, when we moved to Citrix, was about the only software that could support a set of pool of machines that any students could log into, whereas the other software that we had at the time wasn't able to support Citrix.
Okay, and so linking into that, what sort of features are held within the software that make it particularly useful for you then, Matt?
So from an IT point of view, the NetSupport, the DNA side of it, away from the school side, we also use to monitor disk space on a lot of the machines, and we use it to monitor switching and throughput on the switches. So obviously that can alert us as well, which we've got set up to email our ticketing system. So if there are any issues, we can get to those before they become bigger issues. And obviously the NetSupport school side of things, we also use the tech console to remote control machines to help fix students and staff laptops whenever there are issues.
That sounds like something that's really helpful on a day-to-day basis. Are there any other features of NetSupport DNA or school that you find really useful in your sort of day-to-day work as the network manager, Matt?
In the day-to-day, it does just tend to look after itself. I mean, if we have the filtering set up for the students to monitor the keywords, and they are set to email the relevant heads of faculty whenever there is anything that's picked up or sent on a monthly basis, a report to them. So it helps us monitor all the machines on a day-to-day basis and allows us to not necessarily dive into the console because a lot of the emails are set to email our ticketing system, which makes it nice and easy.
Super duper. Thank you for that. Are there any sort of particular features within NetSupport DNA that you would sort of class as being your favourite?
The monitoring on the switching is very useful because it can show us throughput. So if we think there's an issue in one of our buildings, we've actually got 21 separate buildings. So if we think there's an issue that's bigger than just a single point or a single classroom, we can actually look at the switch level and get reports at that level to see if there is utilization of the throughput to help us identify any issues as well.
That's super useful, particularly, I guess, in terms of sort of continuity of learning. As a teacher myself, there's nothing more frustrating than wanting to do a lesson where you're using some technology and there's been a bottleneck on the network and you're not getting the access and the log-on times are slow and so forth and so on. So that's really useful and good to hear from you, Matt. Thank you very much indeed. What do your colleagues across the IT team that work with you think of NetSupport DNA?
Generally, I mean, the system just works, so we don't need to have any real issues with it. And obviously, the tech console particularly is great for us. I mean, obviously, we do like to get out and about to go and fix issues directly. But when we're in the middle of another job, we can quickly remote control a machine if it's something simple, fix the issue, and then carry on with what we're doing generally. So that's one of our best features.
That's really useful. Again, thank you so much, Matt. One final quick question in our little conversation, if that's okay. What's it like working with NetSupport? As someone myself who works within the organisation and a teacher by trade myself, I don't ever sort of really need to get in touch with the support team about installs and how things work. What's your experience of the support team at NetSupport, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's great support. I mean, we've multiple times we've upgraded or migrated servers and moved databases, and whether we call if it's an urgent issue that we need to deal with, or whether we send an email in and we get a response a bit later, which is when we class it as non-urgent. The guys are great. We've never had an issue with support. We've never had an issue with any issues that we've had on the system that have needed fixing. They've always managed to fix everything for us.
Oh, that's really great to hear. I'll pass on your praise to the team as well. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. So, hi, Tim. Thank you. Welcome for joining me for this little conversation today. Just to get the ball rolling, could you share a little about who you are, the school that you're in, and the role that you have within that school, please?
I most certainly can. My name is Tim Harris. I am teacher of computer science at St John's College here in Southsea, and I have been delivering computer science and IT for the last 22 years to year groups 6 up to 13. I've also been a head of year, and I'm now currently head of house.
Keeps you busy then, doesn't it? And you've got vertical groups at the school as well, which is not I think it's a fantastic thing, having worked within schools with vertical tutor groups as well.
Yeah.
How do you find that as an initiative within the school?
You know, we've only been vertical for about a year now, but just over a year. But it's actually, I think, the best thing we could have done. It has ironed out all the issues we were getting with really simple things like behavior issues in certain forms, because you've got a variety of different age groups in there now, and the young ones are seeking help from the older ones. The older ones are more like a role model now, and there's not so much of that what you might have seen year 11 boisterous sort of behavior all in one group, because they're not all together anymore. They're, you know, it is a vertical house system, and yeah, I think everyone here is really enjoying it at the moment. No negatives to say.
Yeah, that mirrors my experience. Lots of students and staff were a bit apprehensive before we went vertical, but 6 years down the line, you know, in that, when you know, children were just so happy, and it was just so good. Like you said, that the role modelling by year 11 to younger students, it also made it easier for tutors to help around things like options and next stage progression and all these sort of things. You got fewer children to work with, lots and lots of benefits.
Yeah, definitely.
Jumping into the software side of things,
Okay.
with our computing hats on, teaching hats on, you've got NetSupport DNA and NetSupport School classroom management in the school. Could you share what you found to be the main benefits to support you as a teacher through using that software?
I think me using NetSupport in the classroom to deliver a lesson is really very helpful. The methods for delivery of that lesson allows me to share work with them quite easily through the platform itself, but it also gives me the ability to capture their attention whenever I want them to, you know, highlight something that I need to deliver that I might not have started with, you know, at the start of the lesson. There are lots of, I think, key elements to it that allow me to do a variety of different things without drawing attention to certain individuals. You know, I can monitor the progression of the lesson on everyone's screen, and if somebody's not going the right way, I can deal with that quite quickly without a lot of fuss. And I think that really helps.
That's it. It doesn't interrupt the flow, does it, of the lesson?
Yeah.
You can have that little sort of quiet conversation. Do you find, like I used to find, Tim, when you do sort of lock their screens to get their attention, which is so useful, but do you get that noise, from your students when you do that?
Yeah, but it changes. That changes to ooh when you use the button to select somebody at random to answer a question. It's a bit of a gasp then. That's me. I'm on the spot, sort of thing. But yeah, I do come across that. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Tim. It's so powerful. I remember being, you know, and it wasn't that I had particular behavior issues. When students are engrossed in their work and wanting to do well and achieve and push themselves, you know, it's difficult to get their attention back to the front of the classroom when you're wanting to move on to the next stage in the lesson, or you want to highlight a particular key point that some students might be struggling with, or whatever it is. So that ability to draw their attention back to you so quickly is so useful, isn't it?
It is, yeah, very much so.
Yeah. On a daily basis, thinking about your sort of day-to-day work in the classroom with students, have you got any sort of approaches that you take on that regular basis, on a sort of daily basis?
Well, I think every class that comes in the room, they instantly know to log on, and they instantly see when they log on, the toolbar at the top of the screen. So they know that something's about to come from me, because they're already into NetSupport and they're being monitored, and they know that their direction is going to come. That instantly grabs their attention, as you know, and I will deliver what I'm going to deliver to them. But I think key things for me would be the handing out material or getting material back in, and there's a couple of ways you can do that with the desktop feature and the transfer material, the collect work tab, those sort of things. Those I found I don't know I could do without them now that you're using them so often. It's such an easy way to get something to a student and get the end result back. I'm really I think that for me, those are really important elements of this NetSupport, and we use them every day, definitely.
That's really, really good to hear. Thank you very much indeed, Tim. Are there any other sort of favourite features that you couldn't live without?
I think the view mode that allows you the different options to see on each, on my desktop itself, and how I arrange what I can see, what the students are seeing. That's really helpful as well. And I think having this system has been a tremendous relief through the pandemic as well. A normal teacher would have to walk around the class and stare over somebody's shoulder. We haven't had to do that with this bit of software. We've managed to keep our 2-meter distance from all our kids. And we've worked on right the way through from the first lockdown, using this whenever we could get back into school, and it's worked really well. I can't say there's a bad feature on there. Something I use quite a lot would be the web access button, where you can highlight web pages that you want them to go to and ones that you don't want them to go to. All of those features, they kind of come hand in glove in what we're trying to achieve in the classroom. And I like that. I like it a lot.
No, and that goes to the research as well. If you're thinking about sort of self-regulation and making sure the students are focused, it can be so easy for students to be distracted. And so if you can whitelist the resources they need, put it in a one-stop shop place, it's not stopping them from using the internet and doing research, but it's sort of shepherding them down the right sort of avenue, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And that is a great feature. It works really well. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, you're clearly using it in many, many different ways. What do colleagues within your department and other teachers that you work with think about that they use the software in the classroom themselves?
The computer science staff, they use it all the time, and like me, they've become really fond of it. It's something they wouldn't be able to do without now. Other members of staff that book the computer rooms out, they do use the software, but if I'm being honest, because they only come in once a week, or maybe just for half an hour, they don't get the full experience. So they're not really aware of what it can do. Those that spend the time with us, they get to see that, and they get to see the benefits. And like I say, it's a really popular piece of software, and I'm really glad we bought it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for sharing. So hi, welcome, and thank you so much for giving up some time today, Mel, to have a chat with us. Before we get started into the sort of nitty-gritty of all the questions I do have for you, could you share a bit about who you are, the school you work in, and the role that you have within that school, please?
Yeah, so my name is Mel. I work at St John's College in Southsea. We are a small independent school, all the way from sort of sort of reception age all the way through to sixth form. I teach PE and English as my sort of second subjects, as our PE jobs nowadays, we require a second subject as part of our sort of role. And I'm also a head of house, so I deal with a lot of pastoral incidents from years 5 to 13. So,
but that keeps you really busy, doesn't it? Years 5 to 13.
Yeah, I mean, it does keep you very, very busy. You get a variety of different pastoral issues, ranging from sort of friendship issues to behaviour issues, that kind of thing. So it gives me a real scope and real kind of development as such in terms of my career as a pastoral sort of leader, to really show what I can do and what I'm sort of capable of, really.
Yeah, and I mean that's really broad as well. That there aren't many people who can say they're a head of house for Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 5. You might find you may well come across sort of Key Stage 3 to 5, but Key Stage 2 to 5 is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, there's so many different opportunities, so many scopes in terms of what you're looking out for from the students, but I feel like having that kind of interaction, having that kind of breadth to my sort of CV and my experience has made me sort of a better sort of teacher as well as a leader, really, because you get that kind of you get that involvement, you get that kind of understanding of the way our kids are growing up, and especially in the current climate, we've had sort of a year and a half out, and just seeing where our kids are at from where they were and when we had like a normal year as such to where they are now, it's a real sort of good insight as to what kind of we're missing or what we can pick up as teachers. So
No, absolutely. We're here today, Mel, to have a little talk about how you've been using NetSupport software within the school. So with that in mind, how does NetSupport DNA and NetSupport School help you both in your pastoral role as a head of house and maybe as a teacher in the classroom?
So I use it more predominantly for my pastoral role. We use it as a sort of indication to highlight sort of keywords when kids have been online, and just in terms of what they're kind of searching on their mobile devices, or what they're perhaps searching on in a computer room and stuff like that if they're off task. So I can use it as a behaviour kind of thing, and also a scope for me to delve in a little bit deeper in terms of perhaps if there's some students that are watching maybe inappropriate things or seeing things on the internet that aren't probably age appropriate, or and also looking at the sort of mental health aspects of them, if they're searching for something that's kind of quite deep and meaningful, or perhaps shows what kind of behaviors they're portraying. It means that we can have that kind of early insight as to do we need to get involved as soon as possible, perhaps have a little chat with the student to make sure that everything's okay. So in terms of NetSupport, it's a really good tool for us to identify any sort of key individuals where perhaps we need to have that kind of investment and that kind of like I said, just that extra support for that student.
No, absolutely. And I think that's so key, isn't it? It gives you that sort of contextual intelligence as to what's going on in their lives, and not in a big brother way, but in a way which sort of helps you provide, we mentioned loco parentis before. And so just like any parent would want to know the sort of things that their children are up to. So particularly in your setting with boarding, I know you've got day students as well as boarders as well. But that contextual information that helps you provide that important role that you have is so useful, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the fact that the NetSupport itself breaks down the keywords and puts it into different sort of subtitles as such, different folders, so you can see whether it's a bullying thing or a mental thing or a health related thing, and it really gives that kind of indication. And there are some days that perhaps it props up and it's based upon something else and they've been searching, but it gives you that kind of benefit of the doubt of actually your student is okay, they're just searching for something to do with perhaps their classwork or whatnot. But yeah, like I said, it just gives that breakdown of who do we need to go and find to support them in the best way.
Thank you, Mel. Linking into that and going off piste a bit here, but does it inform some of the activities you might do as well? I mean, one of the roles I'm sure that you have as part of your role as head of house is to come up with assemblies and topics to take place during tutor time, those sort of things. Does the software help give you insights into things that you might need to spend some time reflecting upon with the learners in that kind of way as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's all depending on what they're searching as such, but also it gives us scope to talk to our PSHE coordinator to perhaps put some extra PSHE lessons in terms of what they're searching. So the example would be what they're looking at online, making sure it's age appropriate. And it also gives scope to perhaps have parents in as well to arrange parent meetings to see, like, this is the kind of thing that's cropping up nowadays. You see particular TikTok trends or memes or whatever else is going on this sort of the young world as such, to find out exactly what we should be looking out for as teachers and as parents, really.
No, absolutely. And it's so lovely to hear that you're being able to use it in so many different ways as well, Mel. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much indeed. Speaking about sharing how you think about it, what do your colleagues think about having access to NetSupport products within the school? How are they sort of reporting back about how they find it useful?
Yeah, I think for some of the teachers, I think particularly the computing teachers, they use it quite effectively in terms of monitoring what's going on in their lessons. It gives that kind of scope, that broader scope to see, not take control as such. We mentioned earlier about the big brother aspect, but it's not really about that. It's more just making sure they're on the right track. They're getting the right topics studied in the classroom, that kind of thing. So as a teaching perspective, I think it works when we've got the right environment for it. So your computer lessons, your digital literacy, that kind of thing. I think for us as pastoral leaders, we probably use it a lot more than our sort of tutor team do, purely because we are overseeing everything that sort of goes on. So, and we can report it to our teachers, say, look, your tutee has mentioned this or found this on the internet. Can you perhaps have a word with them? And have that kind of tutor to student relationship, as well as us as heads of houses to oversee things as well.
Yeah, thank you. And again, it's interesting to and important, I think, to sort of differentiate between the sort of the NetSupport DNA, which provides that intelligence around keyword searches and what looking at online, and the sort of the classroom management side of things with NetSupport School, isn't it?
Yeah.
There are many things you can do with our software, Mel. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, as you know, if the software has helped provide any sort of efficiency savings to your knowledge. It could be, for example, around energy bills or printing costs, or providing improved or more efficient teaching and learning opportunities, and anything at all like that happening within the school.
In terms of that kind of aspect, I'm not really sure in terms of financial costs and how much NetSupport sort of we're saving on things, but in terms of paper workload and having not having to print things off, so I can store whatever's on NetSupport onto our own sort of software system, our school system database that we use, to highlight perhaps if some student has searched a keyword, I can record it on their notes, to say this has been shown here, and it's downloaded from there. So in terms of cost saving for paper and printing and extra filing and organization, that kind of thing, it's been really helpful because I've been able to download it straight from the NetSupport DNA aspect and straight onto our school database. So in that sense, we are obviously cost saving from not using as much paper. And it also just makes it a lot easier in terms of process, because it's a simple click and save. So a lot easier.
Yeah, and I guess that's really useful as well with sort of linking with your tutors, but also record keeping, tracking all those different things as well. The ability to sort of do all that and collaborate. Excuse me. So you'll have access to the records, as will the deputy head DSL and so forth and so on. And by keeping it all in one place and space, which makes it easier to manage, I guess.
Yeah, like you said, like it helps that kind of collaborative aspect. Our teaching day to day, there's always something that crops up and we forget about it and we're like, oh no, we need to chase it up and that kind of thing. But if it's stored on our own software and it's stored in one place where everyone can access, it just makes everything so much more streamlined, and you can have those conversations with the tutors, with the teachers, or with parents when it needs to happen, really. So
brilliant, and very, very kind of you to give us some time and share with me today on these things about how you're using our software today, Mel. Thank you very much. Was there anything else that you wanted to share about our products before we disappear and wrap up the conversation?
No, I don't think there's anything else ready to share. But I think the keyword aspect, and the fact you can search via different headings and dates and whatnot, you can really see a pattern in terms of particular students or particular things they're searching. So it really gives us that scope and that kind of like I said, in-depth kind of communication you can have with colleagues, purely because that breakdown you've got from those folders and the dates, you can see things. So yeah, it's really, really positive.
Oh, thank you. And so thank you so much for giving up some time in your busy day to share a little bit about how you're using our software. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Melanie, thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
No problem. My pleasure.
Cheers.
Bye.